A warm welcome to Disky Talk with Liolo. To those of you who are new to the family, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell button. To those who have been a part of the journey, I hope you enjoy this episode. And also, we're available on all audio streaming platforms. So, on today's episode, we discuss all things tactical talk, Copa America versus Euro 2020. And as always, I am your host with the most, and I go by the name of Liolo. And on this week's episode, I am joined by a man who knows his football very well. He goes by the name of Debuo. How are you doing, Coach?
I'm very good, brother. How are you?
All is well, all is well. So let's get straight into it. We do know that the Copa America and the Euro 2020 are currently being contested, and we've seen a plethora of formations being used. So the first question I have for you is, what do you make of the evolution of formations over the years?
Yeah, it's been fantastic to see the change in structure and formations over the years. We know that in the past we had a static back four, and then you'd have the four in midfield and the two strikers, and that was the 4-4-2, and that was it. And when you then analyze the Dutch and how they changed football, and now we speak of total football, where it's about the roles on the pitch and the responsibilities of the players on the pitch. And I feel that has influenced the game, very much. When you look at Arrigo Sacchi and the Catenaccio, and the movement of the ball, where if the left back is covering, a space in midfield, then we have a shift. You have a sort of like a shift in the defense, to cover him. So the evolution of formations, I believe, has been is sort of on the basis of training methods that have changed over the years. The ball is much faster. In terms of the training of the physique of the players is much different. The endurance levels and the demand on the game is very much different now, and that's why you have this sort of different structure and changes in the formation. So it has really been interesting to see the influence of German football within that, and different school of thoughts that have really contributed to the change in football. So it's really interesting to see, and now we have modern football where you have a lot of moving pieces, and one player is no longer just occupying their position. They can filter in through many positions, on a certain game. Teams can play different formations in one given game. So it's been really interesting to see, and with people like us, technocrats, who really study the game on a really intricate level, and we see these things and how they help teams, to create chances, because that's what soccer is about. We're also there's also the entertainment factor, and I think soccer throughout the years has really evolved in terms of it giving that entertainment, because it is a stage, and so I love what I see right now in football, and just looking at the developments, it's been great to see.
And I love the fact that you mentioned the Dutch, because one of the pioneers when it comes to thinking outside of the box and coming up with some of the most idiosyncratic but yet creative formations is the late great Johan Cruyff.
Of course.
And another thing is that as much as formations have evolved over the years, but the number of players that you have on the field is still 10.
Of course.
That hasn't changed. And I also think to a certain degree that formations are ephemeral in a sense, because yes, they might evolve over the years. However, at some point we did see teams in the 70s adopting a formation that you see being used in this modern day setup. However, there's certain things and certain nuances which are tweaked, and there's certain positions which have been refined over the years by virtue of tactical aspects, technical aspects as well, and with regards to how a team would like to actually impose themselves on a specific game.
Very true. I mean, if you look at the standard and you spoke of Johan Cruyff, these roles were defined. You know, you get the full back, you had one centre back, and the other one was a sweeper. But nowadays we call him the centre back, and then you have the wing back, because the full back and the wing back would interchange and would go up in certain phases of the game. And as the saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun. So all these principles really are just a combination of different school of thoughts throughout the years, and it's what builds then what we call modern football today.
Right.
You know?
So let's get into it, Coach.
Sure.
We'll start with Copa America, right? So the generic formation, which is currently being used within the Copa America tournament, is more or less a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. However, this is the standardized formation that they're using currently in that tournament. So I just want us to start at the back and then work our way up, and just speaking through the different positions within this formation with regards to the roles of each players within the 4-2-3-1 system.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we can start, let's say, with the 4-2-3-1, we're a ball-playing side. So let's start with the qualities that a goalkeeper must have and their responsibilities within a 4-2-3-1 setup.
Sure. I mean, the goalkeeper should have a good reading of the game, be able to organize his defense, be very good on the ball technically in terms of receiving, playing passes out wide, a good range of passing. And when we speak of a good range of passing, and I know a lot of people, when they think of a goalkeeper, is the guy who kicks the ball up front. And that's not really a pass. When we speak of good range of passing, can he play a pass to the zone here, to the wing back, with 100% accuracy? And a pass, not just a lobbed ball, but a good pass over here. So that's a good range of pass. That's what we call a good range of passing. So goalkeeper needs to have those capabilities. Skill, not so much, depending on how the team wants to play, how deep the centre backs want to start, how deep does the team want to start their build up. Because you'd find that our keeper becomes the +1 in this formation. Where if we're under pressure, we are always going to give him the ball because we know what he's capable to do. He will help us play out of the press. So a goalkeeper needs to be very good on the ball, very comfortable on the ball. And there are many keepers that you could mention. You look at Manuel Neuer, for example. For me, he's one of the best keepers on the ball. His reading of the game is impeccable, and he's able to start attacks from the back. So that's the type of keeper that you need in that position.
And I love that you mentioned Manuel Neuer, because a name that came to mind is Edison, who is currently representing Brazil within the Copa America. And I love how his game has evolved over the years. And we've seen Edison season in, season out. He's picking up the assists. He's picking up the second assist. And his countrymate, who he actually shares the position with, Alisson, we saw he was even able to grab a goal at the other end of the pitch. Those are two goalkeepers who are well versed and could play in a ball-playing 4-2-3-1 system. They're very comfortable on the ball, and they know how to play from the back. So let's get into it. Generally speaking, when we're looking at this formation, and let's say the keeper's on the ball, the movement, generally speaking, we do know that the two centre-backs would be looking to open up wide. Take it from there.
So the reason why we want to open those spaces up is because when you have a team that's pressing with two, for example, and let's say the team is playing with a 4-4-2 formation. What that does is when you start the attack, and we call it spatial intelligence. Right. Of course, they will start to press once the ball is played to the right centre back or the left centre back. But of course, because there's people in the midfield, they have to make bucket runs, or what we call cover shadow runs. And that is to press while covering the space in behind. And this is of course done so simultaneously and seamlessly that you will not be able to actually figure out what they're trying to do. Because if he goes and he stays, it opens up that space in the middle. And that's why they're so wide, is because they need to decide when we press, how are we pressing?
Yeah.
Are you going first? Which side are we going to?
Hence why there's triggers.
Exactly.
Yeah, pressing triggers.
Exactly. So there's a very good formation in build-up because you have an advantage there. It's a 3v2.
Yeah.
And so you have very good stability in terms of creating a numerical superiority in your build-up zone.
Yeah.
So you play it there. You invite the press. And when you have a good center back, you could either carry the ball through and give a pass to whoever is receiving in the middle.
Yeah.
Play it down the line or play it back to the keeper if they close the spaces.
We look to play out on the other side.
Exactly,
So,
and then we reset. So our keeper's always our reset button.
Yeah, which then gives a numerical advantage when you're looking at this because you're looking at a 3v2 situation where they're able to rotate the ball from left to right. So we touched on the wing backs. They would normally stay high. Now let's get into midfield. When, say for example, we do have the two centre backs who have opened up. The ball is at the centre back. Now it's time to engage the midfield. Where do they then come in with regards to collecting the ball from a pass that would come from a centre back?
Sure. So we said that the team generally would be playing a 4-4-2, right?
Yeah.
So I'll presume that playing in a 4-4-2, you want to cover those two guys there.
Yeah.
All right. Because if they get through the press, then they're playing into the midsection of our midfield. By the way, the field is separated into three sections.
Yeah.
Which is our build-up phase, our consolidation phase, and then our incision phase.
Yeah.
So when they're getting into the second phase of the attack, you want your players to place themselves behind and create depth, because when they receive the passes, they're going to receive the passes in the blind side of the attackers.
Yeah.
Because if you're there, it's too obvious.
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
too
yeah.
obvious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We know you're going to get the ball.
And it also then becomes you're actually closing up your space and your options. Because if that ball, for example, let's say he pops up into that space and he comes, that ball is played into there. There's not many options.
Exactly.
You know, he's going back or he's going back to the goalkeeper, which then becomes counterproductive as to why we had him come into the hole. So with regards to that, it does then become about the intelligence of the midfielders then being able to find the right pockets of space to collect the ball.
Very true. And remember, with the two midfield, these are two defensive midfielders, and that's how a 4-2-3-1 sort of sets up.
Yeah.
But one of them would be a more attacking midfielder. So they would mostly line up in a staggered position. And what we mean by that is that one would slightly drop and one would go.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously that would force him to sort of stay tight on him. But if he goes, he drops. So and those are things that you do at training where you have to disguise the move.
Yeah.
You know? You can't always it's an obvious pass.
Yeah.
Right. They're just gonna press that way. I've seen most certain teams in most teams, if these guys stay here, then we invert the two wing backs. And that's where inversion comes in, because you want the two guys, your two number 8s, to stay up to create the depth. You have then your wingers who stay as wide as possible to create the width, and then you have the inverted fullbacks who most of the time won't be tracked, because remember, for the guy who's playing wing here, if he goes here, he creates that space for the other winger. So he doesn't. Usually they don't follow the wing backs when they invert.
So let's then introduce the other winger for the red team.
Sure.
So I like the fact that you touched on the inverted fullbacks, and that's something that Pep is using a lot within his system. And I say that because Pep, generically speaking, Pep goes with the back four, and what he's then trying to do is he's always trying to keep the width with the wingers, you know. And when you keep that width and you've got your wingers up there and your fullbacks have come in, it then poses a question to this guy, you know.
Sure.
Do I then go or do I maintain, you know? And if he stays, he's can collect and then we play, you know. And also with this, I've also come to notice that the balance of it, that with Pep, he'd have one fullback staying out wide, and then one would come in
at a time,
and then one inverts at a time, which then also creates a numerical advantage. And another thing that I want to get into is going further up the pitch now. When we go back to our generic 4-2-3-1.
Yeah.
With regards to the wingers,
Yes.
right? Because we've come to know that in modern day football, the wing backs tend to push a lot higher.
Yes, of course, especially in this formation.
Yeah, they tend to push a lot higher.
Sure.
And then you're looking at the wingers. Nowadays, they're called as inside forwards,
Yeah.
inverted wingers,
Yeah.
you know, be it what it may. They then are looking to take up those positions
Exactly.
a lot closer in the inner channels.
True.
Yeah.
True. So when you look at Brazil, for example, Neymar would be playing as the number 10.
Yeah.
You have Fabinho and Fred in the
Yeah.
middle, and then you'd get Gabriel Jesus. I see he's playing on the right, and then you'd have Everton
Yeah.
on the left. So they would come in. They have a relationship with their wing backs.
Yeah.
So at a certain time, if he's playing slightly inside, underlapping, at the right time he would go in and he would go out.
Yeah.
So that's the relationship between the fullback and the winger. What it also does is that in our res defense, it's a very, as you can see, it's a very narrowed play.
Yeah.
And it's very good in terms of counter attack.
Yeah.
Because what it does is it has what we call a diamond pressing, and this depends if in a team where it's a high press or a mid block press.
Yeah.
But if it's a high press, that diamond there is very important, because what we're trying to do, we are showing the opposition team where to play.
Yeah.
Where's the space? The space is on the sides, and that's where we want them to go. And we use this line as our extra defender, because once the ball goes to the side, the only direction that they could play the ball is back inside.
Back inside, yeah.
Because we have our fullback there. Once the ball is played here, so let's say the other team is building up.
Yeah, now we start to add the other players.
So he plays the ball here. The striker then starts to press to close that space there. The midfielder closes there. Number 10 closes there. So then it becomes a cage, because the only way they need to go is that way.
Back inside.
Yeah, and he has to have the quality. He must be quality for him to play a pass over.
Yeah.
And it's very dangerous to play a pass over because you have this guy.
Yeah.
You have this guy now who's anticipating that pass.
Yeah.
So that's the benefit of them playing narrow, because in the counter attack, it actually becomes a 4-3-3 in a counter attack.
Yeah.
And we're gonna show that now, because it's a 4-2-3-1.
Mm-hmm.
On a counter attack, you have your wingers then that could go like that. You have depth, and then you have
The two fullbacks will high up.
like, of course, then that's our 4-4-3-3
Yeah.
in attack.
In attack.
So it's a very versatile system to apply, really, and I've seen Brazil do this very well with Neymar dropping into the pockets, sometimes on the wide side, and the point here is to try get into these zones here.
Yeah.
These zones here, the scoring zone for zone 14, which is the zone where most of the goals are scored from. Actually, I think maybe a lot of people don't know this. I remember there was a Sophie and SABC
program, Zone 14. Yeah, and it was because of that.
So for the people out there,
Yeah.
this is Zone 14 over here. So for those who didn't know, that's Zone 14.
Yeah.
So that we want to get into that space. We want to get into that sit zones, which is just besides the goalpost there.
Yeah.
And that's why it's such an effective system to play. It has its disadvantages, but in terms of going forward, it's a really good system to play.
Yeah. So with regards, you mentioned disadvantages, nah? And I just want to look at it. And sometimes the disadvantages when it comes to the 4-2-3-1 is that in the midfield, right?
Sure.
You don't always, because a lot of coaches tend to go with two defensive-minded midfielders.
Yes.
And then we then see the struggle of the ball transitioning from these midfielders deep into the number 10.
Sure.
And that's why then you'll find the number 10 having to drop a lot deeper to come collect,
yes, of course.
which then becomes counterintuitive to what we're trying to do with regards to stretching the pitch. And then the wingers start dropping, and the striker also comes in, and then we become compact when we've got the ball, whereas we all know that the general principle that Johan Cruyff came up with is that when we have the ball, we stretch the field as wide as possible.
Sure.
And that's one of my biggest qualms when it comes to the 4-2-3-1 is how sometimes there is no link between that. And a team that we had actually mentioned off air was Portugal.
Sure.
You know, how they persist with playing with two defensive-minded midfielders, you know, as opposed to having maybe... Fine, you go with your 4-2-3-1. You've got your one defensive-minded midfielder, and then that one is a box-to-box a player who can do a bit of both, where you're
Yeah.
looking at a Jude Bellingham type of player.
Exactly. Look, and this is the importance of pre-match analysis.
Yeah.
And the team you're playing against. Because that's where the decision making comes in.
Yeah.
Of whether do you play two defensive midfielders or do you play one attacking and one defensive.
Yeah.
In this system, however, what justifies playing two defensive midfielders is because most of the time you'd find the wing backs in the zones here in attack. And in our rest defense, the most important thing is who will cover these spaces here, the zones here, because that's the disadvantage of the system. It's leaving space on
Yeah.
both flanks, because most of the time teams that play the system attack with both flanks at the same time
Yeah.
to give them that width, so that they could have their insides, both their wingers playing inside.
Yeah.
So these guys would need to then play cover work in terms of coming
Across,
to
yeah.
then cover for him, and he would then come
shift
across
into the midfield.
of
Yeah.
course. So that's how it's justified in the system.
In the sense,
but in terms of a coach and your own team, you have to look at who you're playing against, and your opponent then determines who you should play, either one defensive or one attacking. So I feel that the Portugal coach here, I think he missed it on the first game. If you watch the first game, he then made the change in the 75th minute, which actually changed everything. You had Sanchez then going in behind.
And Rafa Silva as well came into the system.
Exactly.
Yeah. So earlier on, you mentioned dynamic formations, which is the next segment.
Sure.
The next segment is Euro 2020. The formation that we've grown accustomed to at Euro 2020 and in the world in general has become the 3-4-3 system.
Sure.
So I want us to have a look at the 3-4-3 system and with regards to how it's becoming such a commonly used formation and why teams are using it. What do you think is the reason why teams have, I'm going to say, revert back? Because at some point in history, like we had mentioned earlier on during the episode, the Dutch used the 3-4-3, and they almost mastered the world of football using this formation.
Yeah.
Why do you think teams have gone back to this, however, modernized it? Because there's certain nuances within this formation which have been tweaked.
Sure, most definitely. So the 3-4-3, if maybe we look at it from a German perspective, is that it gives you the ability for positional play. So teams that like to keep possession. And how it does that is because there's a lot of triangulation in between. So a lot of triangles, you always have two options when you get on the ball. And that's what makes it a very dangerous system to play. Also, one thing is that it dominates the pitch. So you have players on every horizontal and vertical zones of the field. And when you are a team that keeps possession, you need to dominate the pitch really well. You need to the distances between the players need to be very well calculated, and it just gives you also that extra man who is able to play passes throughout the field. So for example, in Barcelona, Pep Guardiola used to play this role, but actually Ronald Koeman was behind Pep at the time. So these two players were sort of interchanging, playing as a libero as well. So they were tasked with playing those passes there. Of course, at that time, Johan Cruyff, with how intelligent he was playing a 3-4-3 diamond, which is quite different from what we see to today. So it gives you a balance in your build-up, it gives you a balance in midfield, and also in attack as well. Yeah,
and it's got so many outlets. And what I like about the 3-4-3 system is how balanced and well structured it is.
Sure.
And you mentioned the horizontal and the vertical zones. What I like about it is from a defensive perspective and from an offensive perspective, you're well covered when it comes to these specific zones.
Definitely.
However, one con I want to look at, which we often see many a times, is when you do have the three now at the back, is that if you've got the two centre backs playing either of the centre back, which is tasked as normally known as the ball playing centre back, these centre backs in this case are often stretched out into this zone. And we all know in football that you never want your centre back in a full back position, especially when they have to defend.
Sure.
So that's one of the cons that I've come to find. And also when that happens, it becomes then a lot easier for the opposition to then start to stretch them, and that's why then it goes back to the discipline with regards to the tactical organization. But that's something that I've come to know with the 3-4-3, that these guys end up getting stretched out far.
Sure.
What's your take on that?
Sure. Yeah, well, that's the thing about the 3-4-3. So it will always have a disadvantage because of the spaces, but you also depending on the coach.
Yeah.
But that's why the 3-4-3 has very good rest defense, very good rest defense system. I think you've seen with Chelsea and how they played in the final. They had a 3-2. They had a 3-2 in build-up.
Yeah.
And it also gives you the versatility to play a 2-3 in build-up.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage. Very good rest defense. So when we lose the ball, we always have a man that's covering the important zones of the field, which is our middle section.
Yeah.
And that's the most important part about the system. Very good rest defense from the attack all the way here in the zone here.
Yeah.
And one thing that is very important about the 3-4-3 in build-up is that it gives you a guaranteed advantage, because teams that play a 3-4-3 want to be very comfortable in build-up.
Yeah.
It's sort of like your romantic type football.
Yeah.
You want
purist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to keep the ball with patience, rotate it as much as you can, and the keeper becomes a ball player in this team as well. So you have a 4v2.
Yeah.
If the team that you're playing against is playing with the 2 or pressing with the 3, so it's versatile in that way that you maintain an advantage in the build-up phase.
Yeah.
Of your game.
So from a defensive perspective, we've
Sure.
spoken about how in possession, from a defensive perspective, in their own defensive half, how we bring out the ball. However, without the ball and when having to defend, what I really like about this system is when you've got 3 natural centre backs
Sure.
to deal with any crosses that come, And normally when you have 2 centre backs, the general consensus is that if your 2 centre backs are beaten, that's it. Whereas when you got the 3rd centre back, he offers that cover. A.
Exactly.
B, what I like about it defensively as well, if you get it right, because I don't want people to say, he's contradicting himself because he said the spaces open up. Yes, the spaces do open up, and yes, we have to acknowledge that there's 2 sides of the coin to every formation.
Exactly.
There's advantages, there's disadvantages.
Sure.
The advantages of the 3-4-3, when you get it right, what I like about it is how compact it becomes, and how it becomes very difficult for the opposition to play when you get it right and when you compact, right?
Most
and
definitely.
You look at then the spaces in between the centre backs, you look at the spaces in between the midfielders, and then you look at the wing backs as well. And what I like about it is that it's so versatile, because if you're under pressure, you could always tuck the wing backs in and it goes to a 5.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And that's what I really like about it. And on the flip side, now with possession of the ball, you can be so compact, but yet also have so much width.
Versatility, exactly. It also depends on the team and the personnel that you have.
Yeah.
That player there could be a defensive player, doesn't have to be a defensive player. In a sense that you could either turn a defensive player into a midfielder, or a midfielder into a defensive player.
Yeah.
And what you want is having a midfielder as a defensive player, because you want that player to be very creative. So that's your Joshua
Kimmich.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need him there. So what then happens is that for you to have a balance, and let's say you're caught out in some instances of the game, he's then able to press the space in midfield. Usually the defensive formations that I've seen that work really well for a 3-4-3 would be that libero going in, the 2 coming back, the 2 wing backs coming back. They will keep their position centrally, and the 2 wingers coming back here in what we call a 4-1-4-1.
Yeah.
Then it gives you really a good balance when you then go out and attack.
Yeah.
Then you have that. And so it's really dynamic in terms of you going from a small low block being compact,
Yeah.
and going out on the attack quickly. So
Yeah.
I like how the versatility that I've seen, and this varies from coach to coach. You can use the system anyhow, depending on the personnel that you have. The way Germany plays,
Yeah.
and very interesting because he's playing Kimmich as a wing back.
Yeah.
And what a lot of times people don't see this. He would come into midfield because he's a midfielder.
Yeah.
Actually, he's a midfielder. So you would have one attacking, one number 8 would go there, Kimmich would come there, and Ginter would overlap.
Yeah.
And if you look at the second goal they scored against Portugal, Ginter was the one who put the ball in there.
Yeah.
So you then have Kimmich covering that space. So really interesting to see.
Yeah. It's
in terms of how flexible this
very,
would be.
very flexible. Very flexible. So let's head off to the extra time segment where we conclude the episode. And this is my favorite part, Coach
Sure.
Newell, because you and I then get to pick our combined best 11 from Euro 2020 and Copa America, right? In a 3-4-3 formation. And I must say that this has to be objective. So it's the players who are currently on form and the players who are doing well, as opposed to your favorite who's having a bad tournament.
Sure.
So we can't pick our favorite players who are struggling. We have to pick more or less the guys who are the ones who are currently performing within this tournament. So, Coach De Boer, I'll allow you to open up proceedings. I want you then to put together your combined 11 of the best of Euro 2020, the players you've seen at the Euro 2020, and Copa America as well.
Yeah, very interesting. Of course, I'd go with 3-4-3.
Yeah.
I would have Thiago Silva.
Yeah.
I would have Kimmich
Yeah.
playing as a libero. I would then have David Alaba on the left.
Yeah.
And what I like about Alaba is that he could play as a centre back, he could play as a wing back, so he can give us that stretch as well.
Yeah.
The left wing back, I'd go with Jordi Alba.
Sorry, who's in your goals? Manuel Neuer.
I mean, I thought that was a given.
Yeah.
I'll go with Manuel Neuer
Yeah.
on the left.
Yeah.
I'll then go with Adama Traore on the right. And my two midfielders would be Pogba and De Bruyne.
Yeah.
My two number 10s who are coming inside would be Gnabry as well as Neymar.
Okay.
And then go with Lukaku up front.
Ooh, interesting. So, some of my players are very similar to yours.
Sure.
You know, and yeah. So in goals, I have to have Edison. I think he's the best ball-playing goalkeeper in the world.
Sure.
I know there's Manuel Neuer, there's Alisson, but Edison, guys.
Yeah.
Wow. What a beautiful ball-playing goalkeeper.
Sure.
Right? So I've got Edison in goals. And then my back three. So I'll start on the left-hand side. Here I've got David Alaba.
Sure.
Very comfortable. Very, very comfortable on the ball.
Sure.
I like his versatility. And what I like about him, he's one of those defenders who are playmakers, you know.
Exactly.
A deep laying playmaker, right?
Yeah.
And then on the right, I have to go with Marquinhos,
Sure.
who I think has had, he's had a fantastic season with PSG and he's currently doing well at the Copa America, growing in stature as well. He's a big game player.
Sure.
My centre back in the middle of the three has to be Leonardo Bonucci, plays for Italy.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think Italy are doing really well. And what I love about Bonucci,
Sure.
you know, he's very underrated when it comes to his passing game. A lot of people laud him for his defensive acumen,
True.
which we all do when it comes to the Italians.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
but the passing and how Bonucci is able to
Very
break
good
lines.
reading of the game as well.
Exactly,
Very
you
good
know,
reading of the game, yeah.
and how he's able to break the lines, very impressive for me, right?
Definitely.
And then going into the midfield, I have to have N'Golo Kante, and I've got De Bruyne, and then as my right wing back, you know, now I prefer this man, Joshua Kimmich, in the midfield. However, during the Euro 2020, he has been playing as a wing back. And you did mention the versatility of this formation, that he could always come in,
Sure,
you know.
sure.
And then when you do have a versatile player like Marquinhos, who we've seen at PSG play in midfield, he's also got the legs to sort of then go...
Cover for Kimmich.
Exactly. So I would have Joshua Kimmich as the right wing back. My left wing back definitely has to be Renan Lodi, who's a player who's growing in stature. He's done really well for Atletico Madrid. He won the league title as well in La Liga, and I've been very impressed with his delivery in the Copa America and how he's doing. And then my two number 10s, right? My inside forwards. What I love about this is that they inverted by virtue of the fact that on this side, on the left, I'll have Neymar, who's always coming in on his strong foot, on his right foot.
Yeah.
On the right-hand side, I'd have Lionel Messi, who's coming onto his strong foot, coming onto the left. They both love to occupy those inverted channels.
Sure.
And then up front, the Belgian god, Romelu Lukaku. I have to have Lukaku.
It has to be Lukaku.
It has to be Lukaku. I think
Lukaku,
currently, he's doing really, really
Definitely.
well.
I'm sure people are like, why did you leave Lionel Messi out of your team? You know?
Yeah, why did you leave Messi out?
And for me, it's mostly the counter pressing that I need in my team.
Yeah.
And Messi is not a good counter presser when we're out of possession.
Yeah.
He's good when we're in possession.
Yeah.
And for me, I feel that most of the goals that we can score from this system could come from the counter pressing opportunities.
Yeah.
When you have that speed and stealth, in pressing, I feel that's where you get most of your goals. Because in possession, you might not always beat the low block.
Yeah.
So counter pressing opportunities for me, I think,
present themselves well.
Yeah.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the very end of a special episode of Diski Talk with Liolo, Tactical Talk, Copa America versus Euro 2020. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Coach Nuo, thank you so much, my brother, for coming through. I thoroughly enjoyed this one.
Always.
Signing out.